Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. That quote from Jung isn't just poetic fluff for those with time to philosophize. It's a blunt punch in the gut for those who can no longer bear to feel asleep while pretending to. Be awake. You, the one who's felt that silent discomfort in the midst of a good life. You who've done everything right, yet end each day unsure of who you really are. You're not failing. You're on the edge, standing at the threshold most people spend their lives avoiding. Your shadow. Most run from it. They sugarcoat their lives with positive quotes, breathwork, and surface-level meditation. But your shadow doesn't dissolve with mantras. It waits. It watches. It asks only one thing, that you stop running and whisper, "I'm ready." And that's where the real awakening begins. Not with serenity, but with chaos. Not with clarity, but with vertigo. Because the first step is not rising, it's sinking. Sinking into everything you've buried, denied, or repackaged just to fit in, to be seen as good, spiritual, in control. Maybe you thought awakening meant glowing all the time, feeling grateful, 24/7, being untouchable by anger, fear, or desire. But no, awakening is staring directly into the monster inside you and realizing it's not a monster, it's your unloved reflection. You are not broken, you are fragmented. And the missing piece is that shadow you've spent your life avoiding. So now I'll ask you, will you keep looking outward for answers? Or are you finally ready to step inward? Your shadow is not your darkness. It's your unconscious mind. The part of you that hides behind your best self, but quietly drives much of what you feel, choose, and do. It's not evil. It's repressed. Not a demon, but everything you were taught to silence just to belong. Since childhood, you were trained to be good. Don't get angry. Don't want too much. Don't make waves, so you learn to please, to adapt, to fake calm even when burning inside. Everything that didn't match that picture of being acceptable got pushed down into the basement of your psyche, where you store what you don't know how to face. Your shadow is misunderstood rage, hidden grief, that craving for control, the envy that hides as moral judgment, the jealousy you dress up as concern, that desperate need to be seen, loved, respected, camouflaged behind a curated identity or a polished spirituality. And it's not just the negative parts. You've buried your fire too, your passion, your power, because they told you dreaming big was dangerous. That freedom was selfish. That speaking your truth would threaten the peace. Do you see it now? Your shadow isn't what's wrong with you. It's what's been banished. It's everything you had to disown because someone, maybe even with good intentions, taught you it wasn't safe to be fully yourself. That's why just think positive doesn't cut it. That's why beautiful quotes don't land if you're not willing to confront what burns, what aches, what haunts. Because the more you deny your shadow, the more it takes over from the shadows. It sabotages your relationships, fuels anxiety and overthinking, keeps you looping the same patterns without knowing why. Because shadows don't vanish by ignoring them. They evolve, they sharpen, they become more clever at pretending to be you. The real question isn't, do I have a shadow? It's, am I ready to stop hiding it? And if you truly believe you have no shadow, it's already running the show. Because it hurts. Because facing your shadow is opening a door no one prepared you to walk through. Because when you look inward, you don't find peace. Not at first. You find chaos. And we were taught that chaos must be controlled, not listened to. You avoid your shadow because you don't want to admit there's ego in your kindness. That sometimes you help just to feel needed. That you forgive to avoid loss. That you love to be loved back. What if you're not as pure as you like to believe? You're afraid to discover you weren't always the victim. That you manipulate sometimes. That you hide truths. That you compare yourself in silence and feel a twisted relief when someone else stumbles. That there's a part of you that judges. That wants control. That craves dominance. The shadow hurts because it wrecks your self-image. And you've become addicted to that image, that polished version of you, centered, conscious, awake. The one who doesn't get angry, who always understands, who flows with the universe. But inside, you feel lost. You feel it, don't you? That friction, that quiet tension between the version you perform and the one you really are. That subtle but constant dissonance, that whisper in the background that says something's off, even if everything should feel right. That's your shadow knocking, but you were trained not to listen, taught to smile, to be grateful, to vibrate high. You dove into therapy, breathwork, retreats. You chased answers outside, while ignoring the one question that matters most. Who am I when I stop pretending? The shadow is uncomfortable. It doesn't sell. It's not Instagrammable. That's why so many flee into spiritual escapism, where everything is about surrendering, trusting, elevating. But no one teaches you how to hold your rage, your fear, your urge to tear everything down. The shadow isn't for the weak. It requires raw courage, the kind of courage that shows up when no one's watching, the courage to break down alone, to admit you have no idea who you are and still keep searching. Avoiding the shadow doesn't make it disappear. It makes it repeat in your relationships, in your career, in your body, in your silence. You don't run from the shadow because it's bad. You run because it's real, because it tears off the masks you've worn to survive, because it strips you bare. And you've spent your whole life learning how to be dressed in personas. So tell me, how much longer can you keep holding that armor? How much longer will you pretend everything's fine, when deep down, you know it's not? Maybe this journey was never about finding the light. Maybe it's about no longer fearing the dark. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And yet, we keep chasing the light like it's an escape route. We treat awakening as if it's supposed to be clean, white, flawless, as if the dark had no role in our soul's evolution. But the shadow isn't your enemy. It's your uncomfortable guide. The mirror that doesn't flatter, but tells the truth. Where you resist looking is often where the gold is buried. Transformation begins not where things are beautiful, but where they are honest. Think of Plato's cave, prisoners watching shadows on the wall, thinking that was life, until one escapes. The light doesn't feel good at first. It blinds him, it burns, it shatters his certainty. But then, clarity starts to rise. A new kind of sight, forged through pain. That's what happens when you go inward. It doesn't begin with peace. It begins with disorientation. You want to run back to your old narratives, back to control, back to comfort. But if you stay with the tremble, if you breathe through the breakdown, you unlock something sacred. Seeing your shadow is not just awareness, it's love. Fierce, raw love. The kind that doesn't ask you to fix yourself, but to hold yourself when you fall apart, to cradle the chaos with presence instead of shame, to choose honesty over image. What scares you the most isn't your darkness, it's your fire. That wild, unfiltered part of you that was labeled too much, too emotional, too intense, too different. And so you buried it. Not because it was wrong, but because it was powerful. Your shadow isn't punishment, it's a map, a coded message from every part of you that was silenced. Unfelt emotions, unspoken truths, repressed instincts. They all hold pieces of your soul, pieces that still wait to come home. And when you welcome them back, the war inside softens. You no longer fight your anger. You understand what it's protecting. You stop pretending joy. You allow space for grief. You stop performing calm. You embody presence. Integration is the reunion of all you are. The problem never was your darkness. The problem was abandoning it. Everything you push down grows teeth. Everything you accept gives you strength. That's the alchemy. The shadow becomes your fuel, not to dominate, but to become whole. That's what threatens the system. A person who embraces their full self is unbreakable. They don't need approval. They don't bow to fake peace. They don't sell themselves just to be liked. They're no longer programmable. They're free. The path isn't a staircase to heaven. It's a descent, layer by layer, through fear, through memory, through illusion, until you hit the core, the naked truth of who you are, not what you were taught to be. And in that silence, a different kind of light appears. Not the spotlight of spiritual ego, not the glow of fake positivity, but the humble flame of someone who's walked their own night. The quiet fire of someone who no longer fears their own depth. So what are you? Not just light, not just shadow. You are the dance, the paradox, the wild mystery in motion. A soul no longer curated, finally real. And finally, home. Something shifts the moment you stop fighting your shadow. There are no fireworks, no background music, no grand revelation. Sometimes there's only silence, and in that silence, you realize something didn't break. It released something. You clung to, finally let go. You begin to understand you don't have to be perfect to be worthy. You don't need to radiate light every moment to be on the path. You don't need to prove anything to anyone, not even to yourself. Because when you embrace your shadow, you stop searching outside for what was always waiting inside. You start feeling without filters, loving without contracts, crying without shame, saying no without guilt, holding your anger without letting it consume you, looking your fear in the eye, not to destroy it, but to walk with it, not to eliminate it, but to listen to its message. The authentic awakening isn't a glorious rise, it's an honest fall. You fall into yourself, into your contradictions, your wounds, your chaos, your stillness. And when you hit the bottom, you discover something surprising. Your root is not your ruin, it's your foundation. And from that root, you begin to rebuild, not with the old bricks of control and validation, but with presence, with truth, with radical acceptance. Every fragment of your shadow becomes a part of you that comes back home. The exile ends, not by force, but by love. And as everything returns, a new fire is lit inside you. Not the fire of ego, not the hunger to be seen, but a quiet flame, a soul fire, a steady knowing that doesn't need recognition to feel real, a heat that warms you from within, without spectacle. You no longer need the spotlight, because now you see yourself. You recognize the person in the mirror with all their cracks. And those cracks, they aren't flaws, they're sacred stories, scars that stopped hurting and started glowing. The most powerful part, you stop wearing masks, not out of rebellion, but because you're tired. Tired of pretending, tired of pleasing, tired of filtering your essence just to be accepted. You finally understand. Being loved for your mask will never feel like being seen in your truth. You are not just light. You are not just shadow. You are the dance between the two, the sacred middle, the place where real consciousness is born. No more inner war, just honest motion, presence, breath, and becoming. The shadow isn't something to eliminate. It's something to honor, to listen to invite back into the circle. Because every part of you that was pushed away just wanted to belong to, just wanted to be loved. And when you give it space, something exhales, something within you whispers, finally. That is power, not the kind that dominates, but the kind that liberates, the power to stop running, the courage to wear your own skin, the grace to be all of you, and suddenly it all aligns. Chaos becomes choreography. Fear becomes fuel. The wound becomes a bridge. Because in accepting your shadow, you reclaim your wholeness. Not a version polished for the world, but a truth anchored in soul. There's no more fight, only breath, only presence, You walk the world not as someone with all the answers, but as someone unafraid to ask the real questions. Not someone detached from life, but someone finally returned to it. This is where the true awakening begins. Not the one that separates you from the world, but the one that brings you fully into it. Not the one that covers you in artificial light, but the one that sets you on fire from within. No masks, no armor, just soul. Most people spend their entire lives never truly meeting themselves. Not because they didn't have time, but because they were afraid. Afraid to take off the mask. Afraid to discover their identity was just a costume that fit too well. Afraid to look in the mirror and see something raw, human, whole, but you felt it. In the silence after an argument. In the hollowness that follows achieving what was supposed to make you happy. In that moment when you look at your reflection and even though everything seems fine, you feel something missing. That something is your shadow calling you home. So who are you when you don't need to perform? Who are you when no one's watching? What remains when the outer lights go out and all that's left is the inner flame? Who do you see when the show ends and there's nothing left to prove? The mask served a purpose. It helped you survive, fit in, be praised. But what once protected you now confines you. And you're not here to be a puppet in a play. You're here to remember what's real. Your shadow is not your enemy. It's your invitation. It's the doorway to depth. And no matter how many books you read, how many retreats you attend, or how many mantras you repeat, if you don't dare to face the whole of you, you'll keep spinning in spiritual circles, missing the center. This is the call. It's not soft. It's not polished. It doesn't flatter your ego. It strips it bare. It doesn't ask for perfection. It demands presence. It doesn't ask you to ascend. It asks you to return, to undress your soul, to walk naked into your own truth. Because your shadow is not your flaw. It's your forgotten self. The child who was never heard. The woman who screamed in silence. The man who wept behind closed doors. The dreamer who gave up too early. The wild one you sedated to be acceptable. And now, after all this time, they're waiting. Not for healing, not for fixing, but for acknowledgement, for welcome, for integration. So if something stirred inside you, if something cracked, don't look away, don't numb it, let it breathe, let it rise, let it speak. Leave this in the comments, not just as a phrase, but as a declaration, a commitment, a sacred pact with yourself. My shadow is part of me. Say it like you mean it, like your life depends on it. Because in many ways, it does. And if you're ready to walk this path, not toward perfection but toward presence, then stay. This space isn't for the faint of heart. It's for the wild-hearted, the broken open, the ones who are done pretending and finally ready to burn clean. Because the soul doesn't seek to be flawless. It seeks to be free. It seeks truth, depth, union, and above all, wholeness. So, tell me, who are you when the fire goes out? Who are you when your name no longer defines you? Who are you when you finally stop hiding? Maybe, just maybe, that's where your true life begins. Not behind a mask, not above the clouds, but deep in the cave, where you stop running and start remembering. Welcome home.